So in Quarks to Culture, one of the main patterns that comes out of the analysis is a pattern I call the alphakit. And I'm going to explain what that is and show where it is on these 12 levels and what I think its importance is. I would love some tough love feedback on this, because it's still something that is in process. In my book Meta Patterns, I saw this pattern, and it's not like it's going to be some shocking thing, but I think I'm trying to be precise about it in a way I haven't seen it. In Meta Patterns, I call it the alphabetic holarchy, because it's several scales, and I decided that name was a little bit too well, it's two words and difficult. So I was wrestling with a word for this. So I'm even open to help on this word, the alphakit. So let me go into it, and then and I think people can just chime in verbally at any time, and if something, because it's not a super formal presentation, but I did pull some slides together from a couple different presentations I've done. But yeah, please say something at any point, so I could share here. Oh, I need the screen sharing enabled, Gary.
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting they've put that as a default now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. The PowerPoint. Okay, I have to do the show. Sorry about this. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
All right, so this is the first few are figures from the book, but I would like to talk you through this. The pattern here that I'm going to be showing where it exists and what I think its importance is something I've called an alphakit, and it's not one. It consists at minimum of two sets. So the alphakit is not the black and white triangle at the bottom. It's the combination of the element set and the cornucopia set. And these are, I struggle with these words. There might be better words. And there's also something that's also important here is the field of possibilities, which is around the cornucopia set. So the alphakit is represented as a binary at the bottom, but it's not binary. It's going to be the phonemes in English. It's going to be the amino acids in the forming of proteins. It's meant to be a set of elements that is relatively small in number. And this is something I would love to have some discussion about when I get into it a little, maybe a little bit farther along. But it's not, in binary computer code, at minimum, it's got to be binary, because otherwise you can't have things combined. So I made this graphic to be minimum element set of two things, and then the idea of a splaying of various patterns of black and white in this cornucopia set. The concept of the cornucopia set is that it's made from the elements in the element set, and it's not just made from them, it's huge in number. And this is going to be something that's going to come in later as well, because it's not, for example, I'm not going to apply it to protons and neutrons forming nuclei, even though protons and neutrons could be are an element set in a way, and they make a bigger number. But the idea, this is what I want some comments on of the cornucopia set, is that the numbers are really huge. Now, if that sounds not so that's fuzzily quantitative, and that I would like some discussion on as well. And the other aspect is that the field of possibilities, the cornucopia set has not reached what it could be, has not reached all the possibilities. And that's going to play into importance in evolutionary dynamics, in biological evolutionary dynamics and cultural evolutionary dynamics, which is going to be, again, to contrast it with protons and neutrons forming nuclei, 90, 90 something, well, it depends on how you're going to define the nuclei, 92 naturally occurring elements. That's basically a pretty much a closed field, except for what people make in the particle accelerators. So I'm trying to do a little bit of, yes.
I like that you recognized this and gave it a name. Most of us are probably aware of it dimly, but haven't actually named it. So I think it's a step forward to recognize that it's a pattern and give it a name.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah,
so,
let me ask a question, if I may, Tyler. So you got the element set and the cornucopia set. In order to generate a cornucopia, there's another piece that I was trying to remember if you had mentioned it in the book, and I just couldn't pull it up. But it has to do with the number of the kinds of combinations that you can make with the element set and the any restrictions. So when you're talking about nuclei, you're talking about there's sort of a natural restriction on it going any further. Whereas if we're talking about bit strings in computerese, the string can be as long as you like. We're talking about words using letters. There's sort of there's no absolute limit, but there's sort of a natural limit in terms of how long any given word can be. And then we get around that by the fact that you put words into sentences and sentences into paragraphs. So there's a hierarchy of extension to this idea of a cornucopia set. So maybe you can walk through that a little bit too.
Oh,
I have a question. I have a question too. I don't know if it's going to be dealt with later, but with alpha, it kind of, puts it in the realm of language. But when you talk about nuclei, it seems that it's beyond the realm of language. So can you address the difference between the alpha kit and the language?
Oh, Helen, so I struggled with a term here.
Yeah, that's
so the alpha is yes, I didn't want to, it's not an alphabet. And
on the other hand, languages are included in there because
yes. So let's take that up later, because there might
but I just let it hang in the air.
It's really a good point, and it's I struggled with the term, with trying to name it. So if you just keep in mind, it's a set of elements and even the cornucopia, I was originally calling it the near infinity set.
But my question is not innocent, because
no,
in relation to semiosis, you tend to think that semiosis is just about language, but it's not about language either only. Languages are included in there, sign systems that are for communication, but it goes beyond that. So I'm very interested in the relationship or the role of these alpha kits in a broad role in regards to semiosis. So that's the question I would like to, yeah.
Good. So after I show the three main examples, let's revisit. Let's see what what you want to say after that.
Okay.
Because there'll be a physics example, a biological, and a cultural example.
Yep.
Okay. Did it move?
Yep.
Yep.
Are you going to address the generative?
Oh, yes, George. Thank you. Yes. So what George said about the multiple scales following that, and the fact that there are limitations, both on the the numbers in the cornucopia set, and George, in not everything in not all the elements in the element set can connect with all other elements in the element set. That's another limitation that we'll go into.
And
so, yes.
Can I just put also a little note here, is that can we talk about structural limitation of the cornucopia? Just like, for example, if you put yourself in the interpretation or in the action or cognition in terms of Maturana, Varela, that what is processed is limited by the structure of what is processing the actual sign system or whatever, or you know, something like that.
Yes. So let's
Just a note.
I'll keep that in mind, Helen. And right, because in the biological example, the alpha kit exists inside a cell, and in the human example, it exists inside a cultural group.
Yeah.
So yes, let's keep that in mind, what it exists within.
Okay, and I'll try and not intervene anymore.
No, I want this. Just we're a small group. I really enjoy all of you. This is what I want. I really want some feedback on this.
Okay. Like Helene, I've been wondering about another example of. Like Helene, I don't want to slow you down, but while we've been talking, I've put a note in the chat. One interesting example which might fit it is prime numbers. So you've got the set of digits 0 to 9, and the prime numbers make up an apparently infinite cornucopia set within a much larger infinite set of integers.
Yeah, Hillary, I wasn't going to speak on numbers or music. But they're in the human realm and they're very important.
Yeah, cool, right.
And I think they're in a family. I mean, we can talk about that too, Hillary. That would be really good to talk about.
Okay.
So the main example, so these are the 12 levels of the grand sequence, and the main ones that I want to show regarding an alpha kit are levels 4 and 5, atoms going to molecules, in which the atoms are the element set and the molecules are the cornucopia set. They exist as actual levels in the grand sequence. So there's an alpha kit in the physical, chemical, dynamical realm. I also want to show you something about the prokaryotic cell alpha kit, in which the alpha kit is inside the cells. And I also want to talk about something in level 10, the cultural, well, this is an older, cultural webs of we, because this is the meta group. This is this groups of groups that language and material culture can weave together larger groups of people other than the daily ecological group of maybe 20 to 50 people. And I'm going to show you, so let me just step you through this. So the summary diagram here is that this alpha kit, this is from Quarks to Culture, this is the standard model of the quanta things, atoms and molecules, prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells, animal social groups, animals, multicellular organisms, animal social groups, the human level, agriculture, and the state. I just made them into three-letter codon things so I could, but they're in the caption, but you don't have to memorize them. But what I want to talk about is that this alpha kit is definitely of an atoms to molecules. 92 naturally occurring atoms make virtually countless numbers of molecules. A lot of this has to do with carbon, of course. The numbers of molecules without considering the special properties of carbon in our universe are much more limited, but they do make a huge number of molecules. And then at the prokaryotic cell, which is the base level for the realm of biological evolution. And I'm gonna actually blow this up a little bit, because the alpha kit that's inside a cell is a genetic, is the gene. Most people would say it's the genes, but I'm going to talk about the amino acid, because that makes proteins, which are the sort of the workhorse molecules inside a cell. And then in the human level, I need to talk about that as well, because it's the phonemes going to words in spoken language. But there's of course relationship as we later go to the written alphabet language. The two spirals here at the biological evolution and cultural evolution are meant to represent the propagation, variation, selection processes of evolution. And the case is that the alpha kit as a sort of a dynamical, homeostatic creating pattern in biological evolution inside the cell, and the language, human language alpha kit, are very much tied up with respectively biological and cultural evolution. Now, at the quantum level, at the level of the things of the standard model, I show here a really faded element set, because sometimes this level is called the periodic table of the particle physicists, because it's those things that combine into protons and neutrons, that combine into nuclei, and so so these levels of the standard model, of the grand sequence here, are combinations of the previous levels. But I show this as a faded alpha kit, because it doesn't make, at first it's not very productive. The things of the standard model are, depending on how you count them, Tom probably has this, it's like 12 plus the 12 fermions plus the 4 bosons and the Higgs, it's maybe 15 things, but then you have the antis of those. It's not, I don't need to try to do a count there, but it goes to stable. The stable structure are protons and neutrons in our universe at level 2, even though the particle physicists have made hundreds of combinations of quarks, but they're not stable. And then the protons and neutrons too go on the NCL level, go to like 92 stable, they're not all stable, but 92 naturally occurring nuclei. And then they combine with atoms and they go to 92 kinds of atoms. So there is a buildup, a very important buildup of size and a change in relationships in which the electrical dynamic, in which the force dynamics get more subtle. But I don't call them I don't call them alpha kit structures, because they're relatively limited. George was talking about the limitations. In our universe, those first 4 are relatively limited and basically closed out systems in our universe. Things have been explored in terms of the real world. It's a finite set. But when you get to atoms going to molecules, all hell breaks loose in terms of possibility, because of the kinds of relationships those atoms have with each other can make nearly infinite numbers of molecules.
So you could look at this as a spectrum, and you're identifying the ones at the extreme end of the spectrum, where the ratio between the cornucopia possibilities and the elements is very high.
It's very high, yes. And I think that there's something, so the case is that there's something particularly special, Tom, at that end of the spectrum, because what happened with the molecule, let me just see what I have here next. Yes. What happened with the molecule so this shows the alpha kit turned on its side, the atoms being the element set, the molecules being the cornucopia set. And then at the origin of the molecules are so rich in their interaction with each other. This is George's comment, relates to George's comment of building up scale, that what the molecules interacting with each other are so rich that in this chemical evolutionary dynamics, and eventually the molecules, we don't understand all about the origin of life, but the molecules relationships in systems with each other got so rich they could start, molecules could sort of self-make each other in types, that eventually what came out, we don't understand this yet, was an alpha kit that I'm calling a genetic alpha kit, but it's actually two alpha kits together. And there's two things I want to go into here. One is that just quick review of the double alpha kit structure of the full genetic alpha kit, and then bringing up the point that this is within the richness of the molecules, that the richness of the molecules as a cornucopia set was so vast that one of the possibilities that formed were an alpha kit system within molecules, which are so an elements and cornucopia within the cornucopia of molecules. And those, yes.
Tyler, can we go back before you get
Yes.
going on that?
Yes.
I'm curious about the role of electron shells. This is all the way back to the atomic.
Yes.
Is it really the nuclei? I'm trying to just straighten out my understanding here. It's the electron shells and the valence shells in particular that give the capacity for combination,
Yes.
right? So that would be the generative aspect.
Yes.
Did you account for that, or is this?
Yes. Yes. Well, so that's part of the description. That would be a necessary part of the description, George, of why atoms can give rise to so many types of molecules, which is different from, let's say, protons and neutrons giving rise to nuclei, why the nuclei are basically filled out. It's a complete set. It has to do with the valence electrons having lack or surplus, and those lacks or surpluses give the atoms the ability to relate and bond to many other types of atoms.
But you're not calling the valence shells part of the alpha kit.
No, I would consider them character properties of the atom. I see what you're saying, but they don't.
No, I'm not actually suggesting you should.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get it clear in my mind what.
I was calling the 92 atoms the alpha kit, and the valence shells being connective properties that any given atom has more or less of. So the noble gases have almost zero. It's not exactly zero. You can make diatomic fluorine, I think, or something, but they're close to zero possibilities. And carbon has huge possibilities because it's got 4 valence electrons, and it can also bond with itself.
And then there's the geometry of those shells.
In the geometry of those shells, yep.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because when you started talking about the twin alpha kit, the genetic alpha kit, you said something about, a doubling, and it just.
Okay, so here,
that's good.
Okay, so for the biological, there's 2 major language-like or structures in cells. One is the and now, so this is actually gets to the of what's being called an alpha kit and what's not being called an alpha kit. Tom's spectrum here, which I like that term. There are 4 bases of DNA. These are these A, C, T, and G that are the 4 basic kind of alphabet structure. They do not get arranged to form genes directly. They get arranged in triplets called codons, of which there are 64. So it can be AAA, ACT, AGT. You can go through the combinations of 4, A, C, G, and T, and you can get, there are 64 combinations that are strung, that are of triplets. And so when the DNA is being read, when the DNA is being read by the reading machinery to translate it into proteins, it's moving along, and it's binding these bases in triplets called codons, of which there are 64. So that would be an example of 4 bases giving rise to 64 codons. So there is an expansion of possibility, but it's not huge. It's only 4 to 64, and it's complete. That all 64 do exist in the DNA. They are all important. It's played out. So I don't call that an alpha kit. I don't call that I don't call the codons a cornucopia set, even though it's 64 compared to 4 bases. But to my mind, it's not a large enough leap, and there's no possibilities. But when you get to the genes, which are strings of codons, and they're not all in the eukaryotic cell, they're not all exactly as one string, like a tape, like a
Not
tape.
contiguous.
These are not contiguous. Thank you, Tom.
Introns and extrons or whatever.
Introns and exons, yeah, they can be separated by spaces. Where in the prokaryotic cell, I think they're much more closer to being contiguous. But the important point is that these genes, being made of hundreds of codons, typically in length, because they correspond to protein structure, which I'll get into in a second, the genes are, well, I quote Paul Falkowski in the book, who says that there are millions of genes, but this gets into, is the gene hemoglobin, and the chimp hemoglobin is not exactly the human hemoglobin. So there's variants of genes. The numbers are, Carl Sagan, where they would say they're astronomical. There are papers written on the protein universe. They call it the protein universe, and talking about billions, trillions of possible viable proteins in the possibility space that I showed earlier as part of the alpha kit idea, that there's more sitting there in possibilities.
If you take a protein that's 100 amino acids and there's 20 common amino acids, you have 20 to the 100th power, which is 10 to a much higher power. It's basically limitless, as you said. So there's a lot to be explored that has not ever been reached, I'm sure, at this point.
Yeah, and this is very key, I think you can see, to biological evolution, because since variants in organisms relate to genetic variants, there's virtually unlimited exploration that can go on and that's why I think I try to argue there's a close pairing of these alpha kit systems and and biological evolution. In the biological evolution, we could talk about the chemical evolution as well. But the reason I have this a little line between these two alphakit systems is that the codons, the 64 codons, when they are read by the messenger RNA that goes to the DNA and then goes back out into the ribosomes of the cells to tell the cell at the ribosome which amino acid to bring in, there's about 20 amino acids of the 64 codons. Now you might say, wow, there's 64 codons. It's gone down to 20 amino acids. It turns out there's redundancy, that some of the 64 codons, which themselves are different, code for the same amino acid. There's some interesting material there, but it is thought that this allows, there's room for maybe more amino acids to come into play someday, but right now 20 amino acids are all that's needed to make this protein universe, as Tom just brought out. 100 amino acids in a protein that could be 20 different types. The number is cosmological of the protein universe. To show an example, in our bodies, in the typical body of a eukaryotic cell, there are something like 50,000 to 100,000 different types of proteins. And that's just in the constriction of our body. 20 amino acids make 50 or 100,000 types. So that's, Tom, what's the math on that? Like, is that 3 orders of magnitude right there? 20 to 20,000. Yeah, it's more than 3 orders of magnitude right in our bodies of the element set of amino acids going to the cornucopia set of proteins. And in all living things, it's the same 20 amino acids, which shows the unity of life, for one thing, making the unique proteins in all those different creatures, which is why the numbers are already in the millions. And if you look at the variants of those proteins, like the variants in hemoglobin or the variants in Rubisco in plants, which would be considered the same protein, there's huge number of variants, and those differences mean something to those individual plants. So what this shows, a couple points I want to go to culture in a second and then have the discussion. But the couple points are that the alphakit is not just one, it doesn't have to be just one, it's not just the element set going to the cornucopia set, but the case is that that pattern has been found by the complexities of the molecules, and now that is key to life. It's in all life, this upper structure I show you of this double alphakit structure, which I'm collectively calling the genetic alphakit. And it's really important in biological evolutionary dynamics because of its possibility to give variation. That cultural evolution, and then I'm going to open this up for some discussion, is this is from the Quarks to Culture book again. The main thing here is what I'm calling the linguistic alphakit of the alphakit structure. And this is phonemes going to words. In English, it's about 40 different phonemes, because there's multiple ways to the individual letter A could be pronounced in different ways. The number of phonemes is different with languages. There's some interesting work in which some of the African click languages have more phonemes. The linguists are saying that there is an evolution of phonemes that's probably happened over time. And so the oldest languages tend to have more phonemes as phonemes get added. But the point is that a relatively small number of sounds can get combined and to make virtually an infinite number of words. Now, George brought up the cognitive limitations that we may not need. There's something like most people are using 10,000 words, 30,000 words. There's something like 100,000 words in action. But if you need to make up a new word, like I did with combogenesis or George did with ontogenesis, that it's possible to do because of the phoneme structure of our language. And so the words can expand if they need to, and words can go obsolete. And Hillary brought up numbers. And if you put numbers in here with the words, Hillary, we can name all the proteins. So the proteins that are in the millions, when you can combine, so the molecular biologists will call these, they'll call something like clock for the protein that's very important in the circadian rhythm of organisms, called clock. So they can use a language term, but then they can give it numbers to look at its variance. So we can have words for all the numbers of proteins, which are larger than our current typical use of words. But if we need them, if we need more words, the possibility is available. And my case is that this is very important in cognitive evolutionary dynamics inside our minds. We can make up words. We can think about words. In social evolutionary dynamics, it allows a really complicated verbal system to exist, and this has existed since the tribal metagroups and continued into agricultural villages and continued into the state. So this was very, very much key, the ability to have new words. Now, one of the things is that these words get put in, the words by themselves don't mean very much, literally. It's words in systems that allow groups to be in conversation and make complexity. And there is a similarity between the words being in systems and proteins being in systems, because proteins by themselves are not very much. It's only because there's 50,000 kinds of proteins in chemical interaction inside the cells, which make it so important. And because we have tens of thousands of words in interaction in our cultural groups, this allows the complexity within these cultural evolution and biological evolution. So you can think of outside the words, and I do refer to this in the book as sentences, if it's written language, as paragraphs. So outside the words is a shell of sentences. But now here's a question to all you, that the sentences, obviously, if there's 30,000 words, you could make in sentences with, say, 5 words, you could do a math like Tom just did. And yes, that is true. You could substitute nouns, but there's structure to these sentences. There's nouns and verbs and adverbs. So this is where I think it gets really interesting, because there's structure inside the cells as well. It's not any protein relates to any protein. There are what they call motifs, or systems of proteins. However, yes, go ahead.
Can I throw in something here, Tyler?
Yes, Lynn.
As soon as you said words to sentences,
Yeah.
And throughout the talk, I've been making notes. Of course, I've been working on information yet again. I think I kind of nailed it I have to present it to you guys in some form, but so I'm thinking in terms of information processing. And what you're doing with and you've mentioned it a number of times in different kinds of ways. When you're moving from the element set to the cornucopia set, you've got to use that stuff. And it's a change in information processing. It's a change in how you process. And that requires programs. So you can consider grammar, sentence structures, all that as the program for using the words. to allow the use and to expand it into, you know what I mean, into that, those programs generate the cornucopia set, the usefulness of it. It's,
Okay, so Lynn, I agree that they generate the usefulness of the cornucopia set. Yes, they generate the new, yes, any new word. Yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
do you see what I mean?
Yes, yeah,
It
totally.
made it easier once you got to this level, it made it easier to see things as, now see, Seth Lloyd sees the whole world in terms of quantum mechanics. So he sees programming starting at the very beginning.
Yeah.
He sees the universe as, okay, the bits are 1, 2, 3, you know, go on forever. The bits are, there's tons of different kinds of bits. It's what's evolving are not the bits, it's the programs.
Right. So I'll have to see his work on whether he brings in the topic of when there is a near infinity in the generativity of some of these leaps and when it's a closed set.
It's pretty much, he does get into, and I'm not an expert on him, you know, I'd have to go back. But he pretty much talks about, again, natural selection, you know, and use and what survives out there from the very beginning into structure. Now I start moving into other places away from him, but
yes, okay, let's drop him, in fact, since I haven't read him myself.
Yeah, I'm going to drop him. I think what happens is that structure holds information is one way to look at it. So these things are forming up, and the things that form into structures that last, you know, some kind of thing that lasts, as survives, keeps going. So there's a process there between your element set and the cornucopia set that involves programs.
Okay,
and that's where
let's discuss whether that's a good term, program, because I would have to because the main, I guess the main thing I would like to leave with before we open it up to such discussion about the word program, because I don't know whether I want to apply that to the cell, but is that as we think of layering, if we think of layering of parts and wholes, I would like what you think of my case that that in special places of the whole, you know, unbroken sequence of system origins, at special places, there's a pattern of few number of elements giving rise to a huge number of possibilities that has, and it's not at every scale, it's not at every level, it's not at every, but it's in special places, and that this has played a really important role in biological and cultural evolution in the 2 of the 3 places I mentioned. And I'm going to make a distinction between that pattern and the pattern of which elements form combinations that are closed, that are filled out, which also are important in physics and important in biology. That occurs too. That pattern occurs on which elements form a closed set of combinations. That's one part of Tom's spectrum. This alpha kit is where a small number of elements form a huge number of combinations that is not closed. And then a third, this is helping me, a third is when a huge number of elements, let's say words of a human, 10,000 words of human language, form a huge number of the next combination sentences or phrases. So we have small elements forming small numbers of combinations, large numbers of elements forming large numbers of combinations, and small numbers of elements forming large number of combinations. I would consider those three basic patternings that I'm not claiming I've worked out how to class those. So I'm not saying everything can be put into those three, but that's, I guess, given what I just told you, that's how I would see it. And that those, and it would be interesting to look at when those three types occur.
So so the alphakit I can see as definitely the few to the many.
Few to the many.
It's the, how do you get from the many to the next level in the hierarchy?
How do you get from the many to the many?
Many to the few again, because you're moving from in your.
Oh, okay. So I think so that's really interesting. So the place that exists, what it is, the molecule, the many of the molecule gave rise in processes that are mysterious so far to the few amino acids within the set of molecules. But that's only because the amino acids give rise to many proteins, which are themselves molecules. So amino acids are molecules and proteins are molecules. And you cannot argue. So that's just a gift from the structure of our universe, that the molecule itself was such a great cornucopia set that it could give rise to an alphakit structure within its.
They're closely related alphakits in a sense.
Yeah.
The one from atoms to molecules and the one from amino acids to proteins.
Yeah, because the amino acid to protein is within a molecule. And if, in terms of the human language, how do you simplify the phoneme? If we think of phonemes as coming from animal sounds, it seems to be what animals don't have in their communication, and Helen might want to chime in on this, are ways to combine sounds, to cluster sounds into words. Vervet monkeys have something like 20 different calls. They can say that there's an eagle above. They can say a leopard's in a tree. Not saying there's a leopard in a tree, but just a call that makes the other vervets. So animals do have signals, but they don't seem to cluster their sounds into the words to make this alphakit structure that we humans have. And which is why I think that the few to the many, my case is that the few to the many is a really profound pattern. And it's worth thinking about when that occurs and when that doesn't occur. And to just go back to Hillary again, I've done a little bit of searching out the literature because it's in music where notes can make basically infinite numbers of music, and it's in numbers, Hillary, as well. So it may be something people have suggested. There's something in the human mind and the combinatorial capabilities of the human mind that gives rise to not just the linguistic alphakit, but to math and music as well. I think I mentioned it, but I didn't make I didn't feel qualified to make a big deal of it because I thought the verbal the phonemes to words, one can so clearly see its importance in social structures to be able to have words make a complex system and to be able to make new words is so important. So I think I'll stop there. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. I had these are just from other things. There's nothing new here. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to stop the share. And I don't think I'm going to need to go back to anything because, but I can if we need to. Those are the points that I was hoping for discussion about whether. So I guess the questions to you is, does this seem to be a valid pattern that is worth distinguishing from any combinatorics, from all the set of all possible combinatorics, and then any issues of my own terminology, which again I wrestle with. Like one of the things in alphakit, sometimes people read it and they think I'm only talking about the amino acids as the alphakit, or only the phoneme as the alphakit. And I really meant it to be the element set and the cornucopia set together as the kit, because, you know, kind of Lynn, what you were saying or alluding to, not exactly in these words, is they only take on biological meaning or take on linguistic meaning as the set of those two sets, and the set of the sentences that the words themselves don't mean very much either. So it's the set of the things made by the cornucopia set, both in cells and in language. And that's what sometimes I struggle with naming, trying to name it a thing, because I'm seeing a pattern here that I give a noun to, but I'm really talking about levels of sets. Okay, throw open to discussion.
There's something that comes to mind, and I have difficulty to kind of grasp it, but which might be trivial, I don't know, which is that the elements of the cornucopia are some form of symbolic, or let's say shortcut, or how can I say, something that has a function with much less complexity, let's say, than the independent combination. So they become a pattern themselves that becomes identifiable with a place in a system. So I mean, it reminds me of what I've been doing on the human language, that you were asking about how come if the phonemes come from animal cries or animal articulations, how come animals never got to that? But what the humans acquired at some point is a capacity to name, or to kind of, I can't find the words, but to kind of pin down something complex with something more simple.
They abstract. They
Yep.
form an abstraction. The concept is an
it's not
Yeah,
necessarily.
no. It's
not, yeah, or it's yeah, maybe it's an
not abstract as in out in the ether. It's an abstraction from lower stuff, right? So when you put a number of percepts together to form a concept, that concept is an abstraction of.
Well, George, George, stay with the proposed alpha kit for a second of the phoneme to word, which if we just stay with it, I think Helene was willing to stay with that, because if we get the percepts that, because I want to claim something very simple. Now, how that came into being, I don't know, but clusters of sounds, Helene, I would say the humans, if they could cluster a small number of sounds, they have the possibility to start naming different species that they want to talk about.
Yeah, because they create shortcuts for things that are recurring. So it's a
And the power of that is because it's such the element set of phonemes is small in number. It's not, now that I think about it, it's not that many different in number from the vervet monkey calls. The
Mhm.
number of calls some of the animals have are 10, 20,
Mhm.
you know, whatever. But the efficiency, if you had to have a totally different sound for every kind of plant that a shaman wants to talk about in deep history, that would be very difficult cognitively, but and to teach people it. But if you can have 20, 30, 40 sounds clustered in 2 or 3 or 4 sounds per word packet, you can get up to 10,000.
Yeah, and you can get into a loop of learning and transmitting through generations, etc., etc. But my question, going to George's question and your further question about
Abstraction or
abstraction, is a protein as an abstraction?
well, I would have trouble with
I
that
was
word.
addressing, I was addressing the fact that the word protein is an abstraction of the actual, well, of the whole group of.
Yeah, but the alpha
Oh.
kit doesn't produce the word protein. It produces
No,
proteins.
we're getting
Yeah.
way
So I'm
off here.
trying to find a kind of analogy or whatever between the idea that you actually the alpha kit actually generates units that enter into a function as such. I don't know how to
Yes.
in that,
In biology and culture, yes, definitely. The thing of the cornucopia sets words of culture, and the key cornucopia set of biology is the protein. I mean, other molecules, water is important, but the key action one is protein. Yeah, those don't exist by themselves. Those are only within human society in one case, and within a cell in another case.
yeah, so and does it happen at the lower, at other more early levels? I mean, how can we describe this process?
No, I don't think my claim is, I don't see it at the lower levels.
Okay, so quarks, nuclei,
Well, they do combine into into composite structures, but in our universe, those composite structures are filled out.
mm-hmm.
So it's not a matter that they're not related. The quarks are relating to each other, but I guess I'm interested in differences as well as similarities in all these levels, but differences in the levels, that sometimes special patterns have come into existence at some of those levels that allow features to be at the next level that are different from features that had existed in prior levels. So the prior levels, yeah, there are combinatorics, but they're filled out.
I don't understand what
I mean, they're a complete set. So we have what quarks can do in our universe are protons and neutrons, and that's it. And what protons and neutrons can do are 92 different kinds of nuclei, and that's it. Gary has something or Hillary has
There is
something.
They can do an infinite number of nuclei, but only the first 92 are stable enough to be found occurring in nature.
Yes, yeah. Hillary's right on that. The protons and neutrons, in a sense, would be like a binary system. I mean, if they could be almost infinite in possibilities, but in our universe, they're closed off because they're not stable.
Yeah.
They're not stable.
There is, of course, a relationship between the gene cornucopia and the protein cornucopia. So the
Yes.
genes represent proteins, and they're in a mechanism that can explore new ones, mutation. So they can go through this huge space of possible proteins and test for which ones are stable within the environment.
Tyler, you've gone
Oh,
silent.
so I was trying to, the dog was barking, but now the dog stopped. So that's why the alpha kit inside the cell is actually two cornucopia sets linked to each other. The gene is a cornucopia set, and the protein as a one-to-one correspondence with the gene. I guess, Tom, actually there's a little bit more proteins than genes, because parts of genes can be rearranged a little bit to make different proteins, but that's a fine point that we don't have to go into here, even though it's
Right,
interesting.
I have a thought. I was inspired by Tom, and I don't know how, but if I shift my thinking from information, which is that, to networks, and I drop all those little parts, that cornucopia set, and consider it in terms of networks, and I drop all those things together into the reality, or into the world, nature, whatever, then some of those things are going to bond, some of those things are not going to bond, some of them are going to form into clumps. The clumping itself then forms the new eventual level, the ones that survive. Now that's looking at it in terms of interactions with each other, and then how they appear. Then I guess what I guess what I keep seeing is, I don't have any problem at all with the I don't know about the words, the cornucopia set and the element set and the alpha kit.
I agree.
I don't know what the words are for that. I know Len has some words that he made up, and I'm not wild about them either. I'm just not happy.
I mean, it's one thing I identify with when I look at Len's words, and some of them I don't like, and I say like, wow, my words, the amount of time I spent wrestling with some of this stuff, I can see it's not that I don't like them, because I know what I mean by them. But let me give you an example with cornucopia set. Somebody said, like, when I tell this to people, they don't get it really easily, because they'll sort of say, well, there's infinite sentences. That's a cornucopia set too. Or all the interactions of proteins in the cell, that network is a cornucopia set too. Or somebody will say, well, you say element set, well, aren't words the element set for sentences? So, but I really want to mean few elements going to many combinations, and that particular pair. And that's what that I named the alpha. So in meta patterns, I named it an alphabetic holarchy, meaning it's an alphabet-like holarchy. But I was unhappy with myself, and I hadn't thought it through in meta patterns as precisely as I did in Quarks to Culture. But this is what I can kind of need help with too. Now, Hillary, I'm not following all the chat because I want to try to stay on, but I think that there's a pattern here that's worth distinguishing as a unique class that is from phonemes to words, but it's not from words to sentences. Because I don't want to just toss in combinations, because then I think that the subclasses of combinations, what I'm calling the alpha kit subclass of combinatorics, I think is real. I don't want to use the waffle word really to try to emphasize the importance, but I think it's very important in trying to understand this. So feedback.
I think there may be hints there in hierarchy theory, although hierarchy theory is so difficult to shake down. I mean, because different people say different things, but and put it in different terminology. But I think the hints are in there. And I think that
I
also,
haven't seen better, Lynn. I'm familiar with a lot of it. I haven't
I
seen better.
know.
I haven't seen people really distinguish this the way I'm trying to distinguish it.
And so if I think of it in terms of a systems process, you know, it's I have to look at what that is. And for me, it's helpful to do that. It's very helpful. If I start looking, you know, I think it'll be helpful too to look at Seth Lloyd's book, just to see if there's some, you
Well,
know.
I have it ordered.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of people have, and Hillary's going to be next. Lots of people talk about combinatorics. That's not that. This is, you know, you find this in Carl Sagan. You find Jacob Bernowski did in his stratified stability did a great job of combinatorics of protons and neutrons building nuclei, but he didn't make a big deal about numbers of the combinations. Hillary, please.
Yeah, I was going to kind of pick up on that. I mean, to me, the important thing is a situation where you have a relatively small number of elements that can generate that can generate an infinite number of combinations in an even bigger, more infinite possibility space, if that makes sense. Because I was thinking when you're talking about sounds having meanings like there's an eagle above you, the naval signal flags, I've got a whole set in my garage somewhere. You've got one for each letter, and you've got one for each number, and you have a few special ones. And each flag has a kind of long meaning. I think U for uniform stands for you are standing into danger or something, and the yellow Q one is a quarantine thing, and that allows you to put out one or two flags and convey a pre-programmed message. And it's like short form messages and tactical data links. You've got a limited number of standard messages. And if you've got 100 of them, then you only need 2 digits or 2 letters to represent them. But it's a closed set. Whereas the letters to words, you've got, because you can have as many letters as you want in a word, and because you can have as many languages as you like, each with its own set of words, which is typically several 100,000. And I'm not
That's
quite...
really cool. That's really cool, Hillary, because Morse code would be like that, right? Where Morse code codes for letters,
yeah,
in a closed set kind of way.
And you have exactly the same thing in product line engineering. Volkswagen Audi Group have spent $60 billion on developing their current product line platforms for their current and new range of vehicles. And the idea is you try to have anything the customer doesn't see or touch, you try to standardize across the entire, not just the entire vehicle range, but all the different brands within the worldwide Volkswagen Audi group. Toyota are doing the same. And that means that you need to manufacture far fewer parts. Yeah, you can generate an infinite number of car models from a standard set of Lego bricks, if you like, and a little bit of customized, well, a significant amount of custom engineering on the outside. But
that's really, that's interesting. In a computer language, and George will know this, Cole, or Hillary, that the bits, the on and off, the ones and the zeros, the next level is the byte, right? And then, so that's relatively closed, but then the next level after that gets really expansive. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
I have a question that just pops up.
yeah.
Is the element set necessarily closed, finished, or not?
No.
Okay.
No, because there is a paper that was in Science about maybe 10 years ago on phonemes, and different languages do not have the same phonemes and do not have the same number of phonemes, and that the oldest African languages had the greatest number of phonemes, and this paper was suggesting that over time, the phoneme set can get larger. It's probably not easy to get larger because you're going to try to slip in a new sound. It's hard enough to slip in a new word to language, but to try to, to try to slip in a new sound, you would be really, you'd be against the society just pushing back on you. And I think it's the same with the amino acids. The evolutionary biologists, I didn't get into this, but they think that the amino acids began as a smaller set, not smaller than 20. And that's been expanding, but it's the fact that all current life uses the same 20 makes me think that it must be really difficult to slip in a new amino acid and have it be accepted.
Sorry, I'm wondering about phonons versus letters, because phonemes versus letters, because for some reason I'm more comfortable with the idea I have a finite set of letters, because, okay, I've grown up in a culture that has an alphabet of 26 letters.
Right.
And I also live in a culture that the same syllable within a word is pronounced in an almost infinite number of ways, depending on the part of the country you come from, and it means the same thing. So
Yes.
the way language now exists, it's as if we've put in letters at a level below the phoneme in order to do something.
Right. So the way I see that, Hillary, is that within the UK, there's all these variants, and in the US of how A is pronounced in the same word. But when I'm hearing you, I still can cluster your pronounced A into A and recognize that word. So
You recognize the word.
So the
constraint that says a set of phonemes has to make a word.
Right. But the
word, but you would not. You'd be confused if I said just a syllable out of context of the word.
Right. So what does that mean? What does that mean? The amino acid is exactly the same amino acid in all the proteins, but the phoneme, the A, B, C, D are not exact. Every person, in fact, if you were to do the sonogram, every person would have a slightly different pattern to pronouncing that phoneme within the context of a word. But yet we still cluster them. We still have the same 40 phonemes between your language and my language, because we're clustering the sounds. So that's an interesting twist on that particular alpha kit. I don't think it changes the concept of the alpha kit as a generality, but it's the specific instantiation. It's a twist on this specific instantiation of the alpha kit in human language as opposed to the instantiation of the pattern in biology.
Yeah. I guess I'm saying I feel more comfortable with the uniqueness of the alpha kit concept when you have a bounded set of, when the element set is bounded.
Could you say that again, please, once more?
I feel more comfortable with the concept of alpha kit as being a unique pattern that is new, innovative, whatever, novel, when the element set is bounded and the cornucopia set is unbounded. Then the element set is unbounded but small, because anything that is unbounded and small by definition can become unbounded and middle-sized.
Are you saying that you're less comfortable with the element set being the phonemes because the pronunciation of the phonemes is unbounded?
I think so.
But then if you take out, I think, but then to confine it to biology, because my case is that this alpha kit, if you just go with that name for now, is a double set.
Yep.
Was key to the start of biological evolution and key to the start of cultural evolution. And so there's a bigger story here about the start of new evolutionary dynamics. So for me, the fact that the letter A or B or the I within, with the way you say cornucopia and the way I say cornucopia, the fact that those phonemes in that word are being pronounced differently between you and me doesn't, I'm not going to throw out that that's an alpha-kit structure, because we're doing the clustering in our mind into the same words. And okay, you're okay with the written letter A, but then there's all the different typefaces of the written letter A.
I'm not worried about the typefaces, because that's just representation of, there is something fundamental about the 26 letters in the English alphabet, or the English language alphabet, and the however many letters we have in other alphabets. In every one of these cases, we have a clearly bounded set from which,
Right.
Once we invented writing, we were able to generate an infinite number of words, and in practice, we typically generated between 100,000 and 300,000 in the language.
Well, I think it existed before writing. This is important. The Paleolithic people, they think, had as many words as, potentially as many, thousands of words.
Yeah, and
before written language.
Yeah, I've forgotten what they're called, but the tribe that was in the very south of Patagonia that lasted for 7,000 years and were basically died out when they came into contact with Europeans last century, their language was as complex as English.
Right.
Without any writing at all.
Right. So that's why I think it's the phoneme word, it's the oral phoneme word pairing that was so crucial. Now, obviously, the written language was a big step in a civilization, but in terms of kicking off cultural evolution, the case is that it's the phoneme word pairing, because people could make up new words and start having abstractions, or talk about a species, or talk about something that happened yesterday to others.
And if once you extend the concept into highly intelligent animals with rudimentary culture that do not write, like killer whales, then obviously they communicate by sound, and different tribal metagroups have different languages appearing.
Yeah. Now the whale song is interesting. The humpback whale song does have a hierarchical structure to it that can make they do have songs that can be like 30 minutes long with motifs inside them that repeat. The whale song, and actually some bird song. So that it's not. We got to be careful of distinguishing humans from animals too distinctly. I want to say I can't read all the text, but Lynn, yes, Lynn says something about the new phonemes and new amino acids are hard to bring in because the higher level constrains the lower level. Yes, Lynn, yes, and it's because the higher level, the selection I'm not going to do this as a pronouncement, but only because the thoughts I've had on that is that in biology, the selection is happening on the level of the cell. The cell is living or dying, and that makes constraints on what can happen within those lower levels. And also consider that the protein is it can be experimented with. As genes get experimented with, it's much harder to experiment with an amino acid. And there's less need to, because 20 amino acids, if that doesn't give you what the cell needs in terms of a protein universe, like that's so powerful right there in terms of biological evolution. The need for a new amino acid would be it's hard to think of what that need would be. And the same with the words. You need to say a word. I can make up alpha kit. I don't need to make up a new phoneme. So those phonemes already give us so much power in cultural evolution.
I'll tell you what I'm flashing on now.
Oh,
And
go.
this is I'm finally, you know, putting something I think together. I don't know if I can even say it, you know. Okay. You've got the, say, phonemes. And then there are all the possible combinations of phonemes. But they're not random combinations out there that we use.
No.
What we do is we have programs inside that we've developed, algorithms, actual algorithms that we call language, to put those things together. Every single, the step between the element set and the cornucopia set to make it useful
Yep.
is the algorithm.
Yep.
And the algorithm could be the language, it could be the, you know, it could be at each level, there's a different set of algorithm, a different algorithm, I think.
How are you with the word template? Because let's say the first combination of phonemes, the most primary combination is a vowel and a consonant. It's not the old. You can have two vowels, but it's a powerful.
Yeah.
Huh?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that an algorithm or is that a template?
Well, it depends on how you define. I think I kind of like algorithm, and the reason why is and George George definitely, you can clarify this one. An algorithm is a pattern of a process, and it's a pattern for how you put things together with a particular outcome, right? So that you can, and if we're all following the same algorithms, the language, you know, for putting together, you know, for putting together the language as we grow as children, we learn the grammar is an algorithm. Spelling is, you know, how we put the letters together, how we put the phonemes together into words. Those things
and then how the words are, yeah, whether the adjective comes before.
And they're different in different languages, but there are similarities, big similarities to those programs, and then there's diversity to those programs.
So what do the linguists call that? Tom, do they call that templates, or like Chomsky's kind of like, you know, the way certain languages have the adjective after the noun, and other languages it has before. So that's a variable.
Grammar, isn't it?
It's what?
Isn't it grammar?
Grammar, I guess. Yeah, the
Yeah.
grammar. Do they have a generic word for, like, is it templates, or it's like slots? What the types of words, and the where they go in sentence order.
That's the grammar.
The grammar. Okay, the grammar. Okay,
Chomsky was talking about universal grammar.
Grammar.
So
Yeah.
let's say that maybe the universal grammar was some form of a, you know, abstract template and algorithm. You know, like it's the rule of at the same time a process and a structure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's I don't know how we could describe it.
And there's a flexibility to this, where in English, you know, a poet will put the adjective after the noun, but, you know, normally we don't in regular speech. But it's not that you're going to be thrown in jail if you do that, or something like that.
So a point of clarity.
Yeah.
I feel compelled to
Thank you, George.
interject something. So over the last several decades, the language has gotten a little bit sloppy, especially with the use of things like algorithm. In computer science, algorithm strictly means a set of steps, unambiguous steps that lead to a conclusion, so to speak. There are other things like recipes, for example. A recipe is much more flexible. It is a sequence of steps to get to some conclusion, if you will. But you have a little bit of latitude in terms of what ingredients you actually do choose, how much of the ingredients, and so on and so forth. So just from a careful scientific approach, I think it would be better to use a word like recipe. And a template can be a dynamic template, which would be essentially this pattern followed by this pattern followed by this pattern. And that's the way our brains work. We sequence these various patterns in order to get to some, and so it's just like language. That's why I talk about the language of thought being this, not subliminal, but what am I trying to say? Unconscious, preconscious, a way of stringing. They actually have symbol-like properties. If you could actually visualize these things as they're going through the this side of the neocortex, and you would see them kind of change. Well, they've done this. So you can see them kind of change, and it's the spectrum of neural clusters that are being excited by each one of those. And they're consistent. Those patterns are very consistent as the processing takes place.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. What happened here? That the elements of a cornucopia have symbol-like properties. So are they symbols or not? But that's what I was kind of trying to get to something that is, that is graspable as a whole formed by other entities. And there's also something that Gary referred to earlier, which is proteins like words or messengers that convey meaning dependent on the receiver. So what's the message-like property of cornucopia elements?
Tom,
I think we're talking about representation and communications. So it seems to me the gene passed through some threshold because it represents the proteins, where the amino acids, somehow the atoms have to come together randomly to create an amino acid. But the amino acids, we have a representation in the genes of how the amino acids form a protein. And the representation can now be manipulated to cause new proteins.
It's a one-to-one correspondence between the codons in the gene and the amino acids in the protein, right, Tom?
And also can be communicated to another generation. And in some sense, the grammar, the language that we're talking about is the same thing in that it's a representation, and we can manipulate the representation to see the world in a different way. And in us doing text or speech or models, we're representing things. So it seems like there's a big connection there.
Yeah,
and it's a huge step forward to be able to deal with representations rather than the actual thing that's being connected.
So I would have a problem with using the word representation of the protein in the gene, but I can see Tom, I see what you're saying, because there is a mirroring. There's a one-to-one correspondence between the amino acid sequence and the codon sequence of the gene. Between the amino acid sequence of the protein and the codon sequence of the gene, there's a one-to-one correspondence. As you said, the gene can be separated into segments. It's not all necessarily one linear thing like the amino acids will be in the protein. But Helen's, when you're talking about, are the proteins a symbolic like thing, I would, to me, that would be not a question I would feel qualified to go into, in the fact that protein, in this, what I've laid out, there is a correspondence in a very general systems way between proteins in cells and words in human language, because they're the cornucopia set from an alpha kit, from an element set of an alpha kit system. So to me, this is what's fascinating. The universe is finding similar patterns, but not at every step and every scale, that there's types of similarities which are really important for us to, which is at least my interest, is in importance in distinguishing them. And I do think the word cornucopia set and the word alphakit are not yet the key words, even though I know what I mean by them. And I told you I struggled with those words. But I think for Helen, a key thing to think about would be going from animal sounds to doing communication to humans having sounds that can cluster into words. To me,
Well,
that's
yeah,
giant. That's a giant leap.
Well, that's what I describe in my latest paper. I mean, not in the actual brain or neural process, but in the actual breakthrough of humans using symbols to represent something in a cultural and conventional way. So the coming through or coming about of actual language is this. Is first step is the building of a lexicon.
And it's the word. It's the words. It's the words, right? The words are the
words.
key.
It's the first thing is the words, and then there was the structure and the syntax. But the words was the first thing, because when you said Baba became father, you know, like because.
Yep.
You know,
I agree.
imitation, transmission, etc., etc., and it was a kind of a concatenation using a kind of a symbolic pattern to represent or to reproduce some concept I mean, to use concept in a reproductive way and not having to mimic or to play a scene.
Yep.
The whole, it's a kind of a simplification of a complexity. It allowed the simplification of it's like a compression. A symbolic thing is like a compression. But when I was saying symbol-like characteristics, I was bouncing on George's terminology that said, you said, George, symbol-like characteristics. So do you have anything to say about symbol-like attributes of protein, for example? Because you use this in a term, in a way that I thought went beyond words and languages.
Yeah, so at all these different levels, I think there's, I don't know if I want to say that there's a language being shared between the entities at that level, right? So you could think of one molecule sees another molecule that's, and I don't know, I'm really hesitant to get into it, but what I would like to get into is when I first read Q to C, I actually, my natural inclination was to say, well, what does this mean in the language I know, in the concepts that I have formed so far? And that's what got me so excited, is because I could see these, what to me were major parallels. I had not thought in terms of a sort of the sense in which what Tyler's calling an alphakit was particular, or at a particular stage, then gave rise to a rapid expansion. In terms of, I always saw it in terms of just increasing levels of organization at each combination, and then increasing complexity.
Right, so that's what I wanted, to not just be that, but to be something more specific, George.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So what do you think now? What do you think now?
Well, I'm going to have to process some more, but what's come through is the notion, and I'll use the DNA, messenger RNA, ribosome example, that we're really talking about communications theory and information theory along with that, wherein the DNA, and going back to my so-called cosmological ontology of having information and knowledge being real, real stuff, the DNA actually represents knowledge. And I say represents not so much in the way Tom is using it, because he's using it to, meaning the DNA represents a protein sequence. But what I'm saying is the DNA, and I've used the term encodes also, the DNA encodes knowledge of what is needed, and that will be the protein. The readout of the DNA to the messenger RNA represents an encoding of a message. And then the message travels out, out of the nucleus to the ribosome, and it then gets interpreted.
So George, we don't have a lot of time, but so this is into the crucial nitty gritty of how does a cell actually work? How does a cell actually live? It's not just amino acids going to proteins. It's transfer RNA. It's messenger RNA. It's interference.
Right.
They're still making discoveries about this stuff. But what do you think of the proposal? I guess I just because time is limited. I need, and I'm sort of asking for feedback on a proposal that this alphakit structure was really important in starting biological evolutionary dynamics and cultural evolutionary dynamics as a generalization, as a general systems theory is a generalization.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I still have to process it, and I'll go back and read again on the alphakit thing. You've got a whole chapter on that.
Right.
So
I think the chapter is called the alphakit and evolutionary dynamics.
Yeah.
Because for me, I want to be on a high level of generalization, and I am, as you all know me well enough by now, I'm really trying to avoid the words communication, information, messages, and not because I don't think that they could be important, but I want to try to stay on the level of pattern that I can define a pattern recurring, and this is really important to me, not everywhere, but in particular places that might give rise to particular kinds of dynamics in those cases. Is that clear, George? Is that my aim here is clear?
I'm going to be looking specifically at it in terms of the generative phenomena that go on, because I think that might be the key, that there some small group of components combine to form a larger set of things at the next level of organization.
And a very much larger set.
Well, as you pointed out, it increases over time.
But in some cases, it's huge. So as Hiller and I were talking about, the Morse code going to the dots and dashes going to the 26 letters of the alphabet is not that. It's still going, small number going to a larger number.
But you see, that's what I say. You're not going to get away from communication theory. I'm sorry. That's exactly what it talks about.
Well, but four bases in DNA going to triplets of 64 codons, we can talk about that without talking about communication theory. We can talk about that as a pattern.
Well,
as a nested.
I'll process it.
What you're asking for, Tyler, I believe, is this is a systems process. You are saying this is a big fat pattern.
Yes.
And you've identified it.
Yes.
Now, what's a better word for it if you're calling it a systems process? Now, of course, all the different processes are all involved with each other. They're information theory, they're everything. Hierarchy theory, network theory, they're everything.
Yes.
Now, what you're trying to do is saying, this is a big deal. I want to identify it for itself.
Yes.
Just like networks are identified,
Yes.
information is identified, all that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
what you
Yes. Well said, Lynn. Yes. That is.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a matter of words. And so you're not happy with your current words.
Well,
So
what the
just-
word where I think alphakit gets in trouble is that it's a noun, and I want a word that's going to mean that the two sets,
yeah, I got it.
and that's problematic. I mean, that's problem. It's a problem with attaching a noun to a two set system.
Okay.
So that's why in meta patterns I call that an alphabetic holarchy, which in some ways is more precise, but in other ways it's going to cause you to roll your eyes.
Yeah, I know. Let me think about it too. I'm going to look at it in terms of the language I'm working with right now.
Okay. But what
And
this helped me out, everybody, I'm thanking you for this. What helped me out, I mean, you are the 7 people in my social universe now that could go into this as a group, rather than like one-on-one that I have things with people with, but that are willing to listen to this for 2 hours as a group. I'm so thankful. What I now see is that what's helped me here is that I want to talk about a system process, or my language, I would say a meta patterns that consists of double sets in which few go to few go to huge number, not just many, but several orders of magnitude, and many going to many. And even, Tom, maybe you could put this on some kind of spectrum, like some sort of like a double axis or something, right? It's like, oh, I could do this as I could put this as a double axis. Too few to many's. The few of the element and the axis of elements. This is cool. The axis of elements. I'm just axis of elements and axis of combinations. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so. But I would model it. I'll do
you got to
that.
show it to us.
And I'm thinking that the set of elements generate new structures and functions and behaviors.
Yeah.
Yes.
So affordances, and it made me think about the initial work that the group has been doing with the 4 little quadrants, and saying what are the affordances that you get from one level to another level.
Well, the affordances come in
in terms
because
of messaging, in terms of, I don't know, encoding, decoding, whatnot, creating or something. But I see a strong link here, and I remember that's what I forgot about our conversation, Tyler. I was saying, what did we say? What did we say? What did we say? I had made this connection, and I have forgotten about it.
So the affordances are really important, because the affordances of how the amino acids hook up to each other. It turns out that the amino acids have an affordance where they have, I'm not going to remember this offhand, a carboxyl group and an amine group, and water gets removed. So all amino acids can hook up to all other amino acids. There's no limitations.
Peptide bond, right?
Peptide bond, a peptide bond. But in language, the phonemes are a little bit more complex, because this is why vowels and consonants tend to go together as the first level, because it's hard to start saying lots of vowels, except in Hawaiian, maybe, next to each other. Or it's hard to say a lot of consonants next to each other, unless you're speaking Czech or something, or Polish. So the affordances, yes, of what makes the elements of the element sets make the cornucopia set things, are the affordances of the elements of the
Yeah, the possibilities are new affordances, like something that enables something else.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying: action, reaction, transformation, something, the footstep, a stepping stone for something else.
Yeah. That has to come into the picture, Helen, definitely. And I just want to say, I know before we close too, I hope you don't mind. I get pretty, I know I get pretty loud and get pretty excited about this stuff. And I don't always, sometimes you all talk nice and calmly, like Hillary always talks really calmly. And I appreciate that. And I mean, you all talk really calmly. So I appreciate that, but sometimes maybe Helen gets pretty excited too. And George too. I mean, this is why I do these things, is to have excitement and pushback, and I don't mind. I told you I wanted peer review on this, so and it's got to be a little bit contentious, or I'm not having fun. So I think we're pretty good. I think we should try to keep it to the 1:30 in New York time, or our time, because it's a lot of us sitting here for 2 hours of time. So
Yeah.
I look forward to next time, and maybe somebody will want to go. Maybe George.
Why don't we round this up with people just saying a few words of how they feel about the session, and what they've got from it. Yeah, just to round off.
Can I start? Because I need to
Helen.
go.
Yeah.
Go. So that's great. I'd love to have more conversations like this about, going back in deep in what, for example, George was saying, language being shared by different entities, etc., how it all works out. And the simplicity to diversity to simplicity, etc., that Gary just wrote about, just was, popped in my mind, lens stuff about diversification, integration, diversification and integration. So how does it work with that too? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big discussion, because it's not the same. That simplicity is not the same as this simplicity. This simplicity
No,
is.
but the diversity may be, the generation may be. So how can we?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
not
Biological evolution. I'm sorry. I'm interjecting here, Gary. I want to let Helene go on, but yeah, I have thoughts about all.
I'm done. So I will put that on, and when someone will say we have to go, I'll go silently. I look forward to.
Thank you.
But I'll stay as much as I can before my boss comes and says we need to go.
Okay. Who'd like to go next?
Well, I can speak to Lynn's message about metaphor, and this gets back to the actual establishment of the mental recipe for creating something. So a metaphor is a good template model that we use to sort of map the thing we're trying to come up with, we're trying to think about, to establish that. And so metaphor and similes and all these kinds of mental tricks are used to actually build those newer models.
Hmm.
In that way, the element set, what I'm talking about is an alphabet-like set that can occur in biology, or so that might be actually a better way, a clearer way to talk about it. But I'm extending from
Well,
George.
the difference might be, though, that an alphabet is typically, as it's understood in computational science, is finite. So if you're wanting to look at potentially infinite elements.
Yeah, I was thinking, infinite elements, because elements like phonemes, because as we said, the element set, it has a hard time expanding. I mean, we're not getting new amino acids, but I said the biologists think that it began as a smaller set. We were talking about hierarchy theory of constraining. So yeah, you're right, George. We can't say it's totally finite, but it would be very difficult to expand those. Oh, okay, that's okay. Thank you for bringing in that thought.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the fact that the interesting examples seem to have evolved to the point of becoming a bounded set. In that, and I guess 26 or 30 or whatever it is letters, there's no fundamental limit in the number of letters.
Right.
There is something about the number of things people can keep in their brain at one time. And of course you can construct symbols of the same meaning. In other words, you can construct as many letters as you like by making different squiggles on paper, and you can assign any meaning you like to a visual symbol. But there's an important evolutionary difference between the Oriental writing in ideograms, where each ideogram has quite a complex meaning, but therefore is not versatile, and going the level below that, where you use arbitrary symbols which can be combined in a bigger range of combinations, and you only assign meaning at the next level up or something. So I think yeah, there's something about this de facto bounded set, even if it's not bounded in principle. Like the 92 atoms are not bounded in, atom types are not bounded in principle. They're bounded by some stability constraint at the top. But that feels to me fundamentally different to you have an infinite number, I agree with you completely, infinite number of different kinds of animals, and evolution can go from anywhere, whereas this, all of a sudden we get this collapse into a very limited possibility space of what is evolved to be a finite, a bounded set of somethings, whether it's 20 amino acids or 26 letters or 45 phonemes or whatever it is. That seems to me to be important and different from the general set. We see it an awful lot, you know, the limited number of musical notes out of an infinite acoustic spectrum, and 7 colors out of an infinite optical spectrum. So it seems to be something that, is it something that happens before the next evolutionary bound? I don't know. But I agree with you, it's interesting and it seems to be important, and there's something that's worth I think there's something that's worth differentiating. But there's a disturbing number of parallels in human language and information management.
Thank you. Thank you, Hillary.
I'm not quite sure what it is yet.
Thank you.
Okay, here's where I'm at, I think, with it. I see that you've identified this one-to-many, 2 sets as 1 set. I think I'm looking forward to what you say about Seth Lloyd. I've got to look at it in terms of ontogenesis and George again. It'll take me back there. And I've got to consider it as a structure and as a process, and consider the features and functions of it. I've just got to look at it that way. And for me, that's a very helpful way to look at anything. And then it's interrelationships with other processes going on around it. That's a really functional way for me to discern what I'm looking at. So I'll look at it that way.
Thanks. And the alphakit in human language and in biology are only functional. I mean, are only there because they are functional in those processes, in those larger processes. So good. I'm with you on that.
Structure, you're showing the structure.
Structure that has a...
So there's another part of it, and that's the function. Since all is structure and all is function, I mean, it's just a continuum, really. It's,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'll look at it that way. That's how I can break things down.
That's good.
So for me, I really enjoyed the session. I really appreciate what you've got here, Tyler. And I can see relationships to other things as well. You know, like you know, the information, knowledge, you know, that kind of thing. The relationship to lens, waveform. I can see that in there as well. I'd like to find a way of bringing all of these things together into, a shared map, as usual. Yeah, by Helene. But I think this is really great stuff. I think it is really, really important that we get our minds around this, because I see there's a lot of utility to it. So thanks.
Thanks, Gary.
Let's keep having the conversations.
Yeah, I greatly enjoyed it too, and I enjoy Tyler's energy. Helps keep us going, and his honesty and willing to put the ideas out there and take criticism and indicate when you have something that you're not entirely satisfied with it. With regard to the names, the way I deal with it is consider names to be provisional and work more on understanding the concepts and the relationships and the distinctions between them. And at some later time, you might come up, or maybe not, with better names, and then you can change them. So the ability to have adaptable names gives you a great deal of freedom. You don't have to waste a lot of time arguing about names because you can always change them once you see it in a different way.
Good, Tom. Yep, I'm with you on that. Thank you. Thank you. The name is provisional. It's temporary holding pattern as the temporary holding as the pattern, the existence or not of a pattern is agreed on by us, and then if there is something there, then it's worth a naming. The kind of a feedback between the naming temporarily as something is being explored.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's accepting the idea that we have more to learn. And we might think differently after we learn some more.
And I like what Lynn said. It's a set of it's one set that's actually two subsets that I'm
Right.
proposing here. So thank you all.
Yep, thank you.
To be continued.
Yes, let's have some thoughts about, try and process this and think about where we take it next time. Yeah. But thanks a lot. It's really appreciated, everybody. It's good stuff.
See you all next month.
Yeah. Bye.
Good.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
Yes. Let's have some merriment.
Yeah. See you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.